Hi, it's Jordan Teen 1, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make my new Minion bag. So it can be a tote bag, it can be a pen or pencil holder, it can be a purse, and I did make a strap that I will show you that you can add onto this. This is my star stitch bracelet, which I'll add the link to the tutorial. So you can see I alternated with the yellow and blue. And if you want to attach this, you can make it into a little handbag, or of course you can make this a long strap to wear over your shoulder. It would take quite a few bands, but I think it would turn out really nice. And let me just show you a few of the things that you would be able to fit into this size. You could fit an iPod or an iPhone with a case. It would be good for your hooks and pens and pencils. Now a full-size unsharpened pencil is just a little bit longer than this, but if you have a sharpened one that would fit in there nicely. It could also hold a small wallet or change purse, so there's a lot of different things that you can fit inside of here. So let me just show you the inside and the back. Here's what the back looks like. So I did make the little overall part go all the way around, and then if you just open this here at the buttons, you can see inside here. So you can see it is pretty roomy, and you should be able to fit one big thing or several small things. To make your minion, you're going to need a hook of some sort. So I'm using the Rainbow Loom metal hook, but you can use a crochet hook or whatever you have on hand. And then you're going to need 2 buttons for the closure, and when I measured these, they're about 1/2 inch, so that's a pretty good size. You don't want them too big or too small. You're going to need a couple of clips or stitch markers, and as far as your band counts go, I tried to get an accurate count, so it should be pretty close to what you need. I used 984 yellow, 820 blue, 98 black, 35 white, and 41 gray. We're going to begin by making a chain, and you need to determine how big you want your bag to be. So I'm going to be showing a chain of 30, and as I said earlier, that measures about 7 inches in length. But if you don't want to use that many bands, or you want to make a smaller bag, all you have to do is lessen the count of bands in your chain. So let me just show you an example here. This is a piece that I was working with when I was starting to design this. And this one here is 20 chains. So it measures about 4.5 inches, maybe slightly more. And if you wanted to do a smaller bag like this, when you add the suspenders, you could just do that one single eye in the middle, and it would make a nice little change purse or to hold something smaller. So I'll be making a chain of 30, and I actually have 31 bands here because whatever your count is, you need to add 1. So I'm going to take my first band and I'm going to triple this on my hook. So I'm just placing it on, twisting, looping it back on, twisting, and then putting it back on again. So then I have 3 loops on here. And then I'm going to take my first band and just slide this tripled band on and get the other end back on my hook. So then it's just one at a time that you're going to just pull a single band through, get the other back on. So it's just a simple chain. I'm sure that the majority of you already know how to do this, if not all. And it helps when you're doing it, if you pull down on the chain that you're forming, it just helps your hook to slip through a lot easier and prevents it from getting hung up. So depending on how big you're making your bag, your chain might actually be longer or shorter than what I'm doing here. And then as far as my rows go, as I start to build my rows, of course if you want your bag to be taller or shorter, you would have to adjust your row count. And as you're building your chain, you might notice that it gets kind of jumbled up. It doesn't stay nice and stretched out, but that's not a problem. As we do our first row, whoops, I just lost it there. As you do your first row, you'll just have to make sure that you're keeping it straight in your fingers. So I'll show you that as we get to that point. Here's my last one. And then what I'm going to do is take the end that's closest to the end of my hook and just pull it through. It's going to make a slip knot, but just make sure that you don't pull on that. You want to leave that loose. In row 1, you'll need 30 blue bands, and we're actually using a count of 30 for every one of our rows. So if you look at the chain here, you can see in this end one we have our slip knot, and I'm going to go into this last chain again. I'm always going from front to back for this row, so I'm pushing through and I'm always going under 2 loops. So you're taking your band, pulling it through, back on, so you have the 3 loops, and 1 pulls through the other 2. So that's what's called a single crochet, and I'm going to do 1 in each one of our chains. So I'm just working my way over here to the left. And as I said earlier, this does get kind of jumbled up, so as I go along here, I like to just use my fingers and sort of pinch this and stretch it out just a bit, just to make sure that these are nice and straight. And if you stretch it out, it's easier for your hook to go through. So I'll just work my way all the way back to the start. And you'll notice as this starts to grow here, this row on the right, it does kind of tend to want to go down. And every once in a while I just sort of like to run my fingers along that and straighten that out as well. Once you get a couple of rows going, you'll notice that it's a little bit easier. It tends to stay nice and straight for you. Let me just straighten this out some more. Just smooth this out a little bit. So we're almost getting down to the end here, not too many left. And your very last band is going to go through that tripled band that we first started with. So I have 2 left here. And now it's a little bit tough to get your hook through this tripled one. Just take your time, make sure you're going through all 3 of those loops. And then what you're going to do is turn this completely over so your hook is on the right, and you can just take a couple seconds and just sort of smooth this out. For row 2, I have my next set of 30 bands counted out, and here's the piece that we were making. So you should have your hook over to the right. You should have flipped it from what we were doing in the previous row. And what's facing you now is going to be the outside or the front side of your minion. So that would make the opposite side the back. So we always need to be going in through what's going to be the back or the inside of your work. So since we flipped it, our hook now has to be going in through from the back. So on the end here you'll see this stitch that you have a band coming up through that your hook is on. We do want to go through that end one. So from the back, you're pushing through under both loops. You're going to take your first band, doing that same thing, pulling it up. You have 3 loops and 1 pulls through the other 2. So it's just important to remember that you're always going in through the back side when the inside is facing the back. And then of course, once we get to the end of this row and we flip it again, then you're going to be going in from the front. So technically it's always going in the same side, but we're the ones that are flipping it around, so you're having to change where you're going in through. So it may feel a little bit awkward at first if you're not used to going in from the back. I know with most of the Amigurumi or Loomigurumi creations, if you're doing any kind of animals or doing anything that you're working in rounds, you don't have to worry about that because what you're doing is always going in the same way. But when you're doing something that's flat like this, if you want it to stay consistent and look the same on the one side, you're going to have to always do this. If you wanted to, you could go in through the front every time. It would give it a different look. It would look like a different pattern for every other row. But for this, I'm just going to stay consistent here. So we're about halfway across. And you'll notice as your piece you're working on starts to get more rows on it, it should become more solid. I see it's buckling a little bit for me, but once you get a big piece going, it should be nice and solid. If you hear any noise in the background, I actually had to put a fan on. It's very hot here today in the 90s, and it was just getting like a little bit of an oven out here. So just a couple more left here. And I'll show you when we get down to the very end, what you're going to be going through is not an actual stitch, because you're always going to lose a stitch every time. So what you're going to be going through is the end, sort of like a stitch that we have to create ourselves. So if you look here at the end of the row, we have 2 bands left, but if you look at the stitch, there's really only 1 true stitch left. I'm going to go through that. And then there's really not another stitch here, but we're going to create one. So if you see the way that these 2 bands are, what you're going to do, they're going to be tight, but you're going to have to carefully work your way in through those 2 and make that extra stitch. That way you get your full count of 30 in and it stays straight on the edge. So then once again you'll flip this, so your hook will stay over here on the right, So now the inside or the wrong side is facing us. In rows 3 through 8, we're continuing with 6 more rows of blue, and it's still going to be 30 in each. And the big thing is you're going to have to remember that when you flip it, you're going to have to change the direction of your hook. So here's the piece that we're working on right now. We had flipped it, so your hook's always going to be on the right. And now this is the back side that's facing us, or the inside. So this row 3 will be the front. Then when we flip it again for row 4, you're going to have to be going in through the back, and so on. So just keep flipping it. So let me just start out row 3 with you. Going in through the front here. You're going in that very end stitch that your band is coming up through. And you're doing 1 in each. And so let me just fast forward here and I'll show you the end. So I have 2 left here, so I only have that 1 true stitch, and then for that 30th one you're going to have to go under this last one. It's going to be tight. And then you're flipping this around. Your hook's on the right, and now the front side is facing you. So you're going to have to be reaching in from the back. Now we're going to start row 4. So going in that end one, back to front. I know that my piles are probably going to get messed up here. So just bear with me on that. And now again I'm down to the end here. I have 2 bands left. So I have 1 actual stitch, and then I'm going to have to go through this little thing on the end, make myself that last stitch. It's definitely tighter and you'll feel it when you try and go through there. And then flip. So in row 5 you're going in through the front, and so on. So I'm just going to let you pause your video, complete that now, and then I will meet you back here and show you the next part. In rows 9 through 18, you can see that we're changing our band color to yellow, and there are still going to be 30 bands in each row. I just don't have that represented here because it's just way too many bands to try and fit on the screen here. And I am just going to do the very beginning of row 9 with you, just because we are doing a slip stitch since we're changing colors. So here's what your piece should look like that you've been working on. You should have your hook over to the right. The side that's facing you should be the back side or the inside. So we will be starting row 9 going in through the front. So you're just going in through the end stitch, and we're doing that slip stitch. So really all that is you're going through your stitch, but you're also going through the other blue band that's on your hook. So you're getting just those 2 loops on, and 1 pulls through the other. And you might notice that the blue sticks up a little bit, but don't worry about that because that will be on the inside. So if it does stick up at all, you won't notice it. And then you would just continue on doing 1 in each, just the regular way here for the rest of the row. So I will let you pause your video here and do your 10 rows of yellow, and then I will show you what to do next. I just wanted to give you one quick note about row 10. When you are on your last band, the part that you're going to go through here is where we created the slip stitch. So it's hard enough to try and figure out where to go through when you're doing your last band because it's not a true stitch, but with this, the way that we did that slip stitch, it's even harder to know where to go. So what I'm going to tell you to do is if you flip this to the back, you see where these two bands are that go in the loop for the stitch. I'm going to tell you to go through both of those and then take your band and do that regular single crochet. So that'll give it a more smooth appearance on the front here. Once you've completed one side of your minion bag, what you need to do is to go back and make a second side the exact same way. So I'm not going to film this, but I will add the time to go back to if you need to follow along with the tutorial again. Once you have your two sides done, what you're going to do is to stitch them together. So for this you're going to need approximately 50 blue bands and 22 yellow. So what you're going to do is take the inside section, which looks like this, of both sides and put them facing one another. So just line them up here. And then I find it easiest to stitch the bottom together first. So I'll start in the bottom right hand corner here. So I'm going to take my hook, I'm going to be going through front to back, and on the end stitch here I'm going to go through, and then on the opposite side here it's this tripled band that I'm going to be pushing through. So I'll take my first blue and it's going to just pull through all of the loops, get the other end back on, and one through the other. So now it's just a matter of going over to that next chain on either side. Just make sure you're going to that very next one, and then you're taking a band, pulling it through all, and the one at the base of your hook as well. Go through everything, get the other end back on, so you're always going to be dealing with two loops, and one pulls through the other. So it's actually quite easy to do. Really the main thing is just making sure that they're lined up and that you're pulling through everything. So I think the bottom is the easiest because it has the chains, which are a little bit larger than the stitches. And it's actually very easy to tell where you're supposed to be going through. Now when we get around to the sides, it's a little bit less clear exactly where to go through. And again, if you ever feel like you're getting hung up, if your hook's getting hung up, just pull down as you're pulling through, and it really helps to just open those bands up, and that way you have a lot less of a chance of getting caught on something you don't want to be caught on. So I think I'm going to just fast forward here till we get to the corner. Now I have 2 chains left to go through here, and if you look, it should be actually 1 chain and then that tripled band on the end of the front section, and then 2 chains on the back. So I'm going through the first set of chains, and then on the last one here you're going to have to get your hook to go through this tripled band and then that chain on the back side. So you can definitely get hung up on that tripled band there. Just take your time. And now I'm going to flip this and I'm going to go up the side. So again, I'm going to put another band through the same one that we just did here. And this one's going to come out through the side. So it's the tripled band and this chain here. Pull through all. And this time it's going to be facing the side. So now when you're going up the side here, it's a little bit less clear, as I said earlier, which ones to go through. So you kind of have to just see. If you look, there's sort of openings where it's a little bit more obvious to go through. So I like to just go through those, and then I like to use 2 bands instead of 1 into each little opening. So I can see here after this first row that that is definitely a spot I'm going to go through. So I'm just going to take 1 band and do that stitch, and then I'm just going to go through the same openings one more time and do a second band. So I'll move up to my next opening here, and same thing, I'm just going to do 2. And then moving up, and it isn't an exact science. You should be able to pretty much tell where the openings are, but it really doesn't matter as long as you get it pretty evenly spaced. I can see here my next set where it's open at the top here of the blue. This is going to be my last set. So there's my first. And I just lost it there. Get it back on. And my second. So that does it for the blue. And now I have to switch to yellow here. So again, this next opening, and I'm still just going to keep doing 2 in each. So it looks like I have about 3 more sets to do here. See when I get up to the top what I think. You want to make sure that when you do the top part that it's nice and secure. And we are going to incorporate that loose band into this as well. So let's see here, we have this last opening, and I do want to take into account this loose band. So I've gone through this front opening, and now I want this loose band to go on my hook, and this part's going to be a little tricky. You're going to have to hold this. I would recommend holding your finger on this so it doesn't come loose, and then going into that opening, because you sort of want that loose band to be sandwiched in the middle so you don't have it sticking out at all. So just make sure you're going through everything, and then one more time. And now you really want to secure this off, so what you're going to do is open this up and then pick up some of these bands inside here or on the seam. So I'm going under 2, take an additional band, go through everything, and make a really nice and tight slip knot. I mean, you don't want to break your band, but you want it really tight so it's not going to come apart. And then what you can do is hide this loop. So I like to just go up through the bands around the seam here, get a hold of it, and slide it down in. And then I'm going to even go down further here and pull it down till it's totally hidden. So now we have to just flip this around, and we're going to do the same thing for the other side. So you're going to be starting with your blue. So I'm going to go to this very corner one here where I have my tripled band, and then straight through. And we already had that one that's going to the bottom, and we have this second one that's going to go out to the side. And there's nothing else to go through since we're just starting fresh here, so pulling it through, 2 loops, one through the other, and I'll go to this opening right above, and same thing here, I'm doing 2 in each. I feel like my panels aren't lining up as good because I'm having to bend it to fit it under the camera here. So it's looking like this one's shorter than the other one, but it's really not. It's just from me bending it like this. So that's the first, and now the second. And then here, this next little opening in between the rows there. And then my last set of blue. And now in this next one, we're going to start the yellow. I feel like I got hung up there. Something, there we go. Let me see if I bend this way. It might be a little more helpful. Yeah, that works much better. Should have done that from the start. So let me just see here. Try to get the right section. As I said, it's not an exact science. You do your best to line them up, but if you're not going through the exact right bands, if there even is a right band, it'll still work out. So we're almost to the end here of stitching this together, but I still have a ways to go. And now I'm at the top, and I have to take into account this loose loop once again. So I'm going to go through the front, then the loose, and then you sort of have to hold that in your finger and go back down inside and go through the back. So that's my first one, and then once more. I feel like I got caught there. And then again, open this up, and go down through a couple of the bands right on the seam there, and then pull through all, make a really nice and tight slip knot, super tight, and then down along the seam here I'm just going to go up through, pull this down, and now we have our bag together. The next thing we need to do is to make the flap. So I'm considering this row 1 of the flap, and for this you'll need 31 yellow bands. So you have to look at your bag and determine what you want to be the front or the back. It doesn't really matter either way, you can just see what you think. And we're going to start over here on the right, just on the back section. You're going to go to the stitch in the corner, and you're going to push through from front to back. You'll take your first band and you're just going to do a slip stitch. Pull it through, get the other end back on, one through the other, and then we're just doing 1 single crochet in each. Just make sure you don't pull this tight, leave it loose. We're doing 1 in each until we get to the very end, and on that very last one we're going to have to make 2. So just your regular single crochet. Just don't get confused and pull through everything like we were just doing to sew it together. I know you might have that in your brain because we just did that, but now we're switching back to having the 3 loops and the end one pulling through the other 2. So if you've made it this far, you should be pretty proud of yourself, and you probably put pretty much time and effort into getting these 2 bigger pieces done. So really it's not too much more to do. Really the flap is the next biggest section, and then once you're done that, the eyes and the suspenders are actually quite small to have to do. So I'm just going to fast forward here till I get to the end. Now I have 2 stitches left and 3 bands. So in that second to last stitch I'm just putting 1 single. But in this very last one I'm going to do 2. So there's my first one, and then I'm going back through the same. It might be a little bit of a tight squeeze, but just go through that a second time. In rows 2 through 7, you're going to continue building your flap. So it's going to be all yellow bands. There are going to be 30 bands per row. Again, I don't have 30 shown in each pile because it's too many to fit on here, but there are going to be 30. It's going to be done the same way that you did your sides. So you're alternating between going in through the back and in through the front with your hook. So you should be very familiar with this by now after making your 2 larger pieces. So you can just pause your video and make these 6 yellow rows. In row 8, we're going to switch to black, so you'll need 30 rubber bands, and the direction that you're going is from the back to front. So on this very end one here, we will do that slip stitch, just because we're switching our colors. And then it's just a matter of doing those single crochets the rest of the row. So I'm sure by this point in time everybody should feel very comfortable doing this. And hopefully you've got a rhythm going. Going on this very end one here. It's always a little bit tighter to get through. In rows 9 and 10, we're still staying with the black, so you'll need 30 for each row. And I am just going to let you do those on your own, but I will show you what to do when you get to the end of row 9, just because it might be a little bit confusing because of the slip stitch. So I'm at the end of row 9, and I have one stitch left, but I have these two because I have to do that false stitch. So I'm going to do my second to last one under the black stitch. And now I have one more black band. So what I'm going to do is actually go to the side here. I still want it to go under the black, so I'm just going to force my hook. It's going to be tight, and just slide it through these two blacks sort of on the side. And that's where I'll put my last stitch. So now you can pause here and finish with row 10. In rows 11 through 15, we're switching back to our yellow, and there are 30 bands in each row, just like we've been doing. So let me just start the first one with you, just because we're doing that slip stitch. So everybody should be pretty familiar with a slip stitch by now, but you're just pulling through all, and then just work your way straight across here. So you can pause and do rows 11 through 15, and then I'll show you how to tie it off. Just another quick note here for the end of row 12. You're going to have the same problem that we did before every time we changed colors and had a slip stitch. So I have 2 bands left, but only 1 stitch here. So this first one is easy. But now for this second one, you're going to have to just make your own. So I'm just going to go under these 2 yellows here and just make that extra loop. When you've finished your last row, you're going to have this loose band, and so you do need to tie this off. So you need 1 additional yellow here, and I'm just going to take my hook, go through the loose band, and then on the inside here I'm going to just go through a band or 2, and then I'm going to take my last band here. It's going to pull through everything on my hook, make a really nice and tight slip knot, and then what I need to do is to hide this. So again, I'm just going to go through some of these loops that are on the inside, and I'm going to pull this through. So I'll go through as many as I need until I get the end of that loop hidden. And then I can remove my clip. And then it should be nice and secure. The next thing I'll show you is how to add the suspenders. So for this section here that I'm going to talk about, you're going to need a total of 94 blue bands for just this first suspender. So I'm going to first have to make a row that connects here, and so I'm going to do this on the row where the yellow and blue meet each other, and I'm going to go to the second space in on the right hand side. So this would be the first and this would be the second. I'm going to take my hook and go inside of there, and then I'm going to push out through the next opening. So I'll take my first blue band and I'm just going to pull it through and get the other end back on my hook. And now what I'm going to do is go back down through this same opening and come out the next opening over to the left. I'm going to take my second band, and this is going to pull under, and it's going to pull through the other 2 on my hook, and the other end will go back on. So now again, I'm going down through that same opening and coming out through the next opening. I'm going to take my third blue band, it's going to pull under there and then underneath or through these two loops on my hook and back on, and then one more time down through the same opening and over to the left. I'm going to pull under and through and back on. So that's going to create the loops that we need to create our suspender. So right now I'm just going to pull one end through the other, and then I need to turn this. So what I actually need to do is turn this all the way upside down, and then you should have 3 spaces here that we're going to be going through. This is like our chain, and I'm going to go from the top. I'm going to hold this loop that's on there in my finger so I don't lose it. I'm going to go down through that chain, and I'm going to start my first row. So I'm pulling up through, get the other end back on, so I have my 3 loops. One pulls through the other 2, and I'll move over to my next chain. Again, I'm pushing from the top down. I have a second one. I'm going to do that single crochet, and then down through this last chain, and do a single crochet. So now just the way that we were flipping it back and forth and going through from the front and back, we're going to have to be doing that same thing again. So I'm going to have to move this whole thing around, and we had been going through from the front way, so now this time it's like we're going through from the back. So this is our outer side, and we're going to be going in through from the back. So it's going to be 3 stitches across every time. So we're starting our second row here. I know sometimes the angles that you have to hold it might be a little bit hard or difficult to do. So we're going through 1, 2, and then we have to create this last stitch that isn't truly a stitch. It's going to be our third. It's a little tight. And now again we're going to have to flip this, and now it's like we're going through from the front side to do our next row. So it's always that same concept. So here's 1, 2, and then on the very end here I have 3. So really that's all there is to it for making the suspender. You're just going to have to keep flipping back and forth and build your rows. So we want to do a total of 30 rows, and that's not including the chain that we first started with. So I did the first 3 rows with you, so you'll need to complete an additional 27 rows. So you can pause and do that now. Now here's what your suspender should look like. It should be a length of 30 rows in total at this point, not including that chain that we first made. So I had done the first 3 rows with you, and then you should have completed 27 rows on your own. So on this 31st row, what we're going to do is attach it to this last row of the flap. So if you look here, from the left-hand side, you're going to count over to the 6th stitch. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's the one we're going to be going through. So what I'm going to do is go from the underside. I'm leaving this blue band on my hook. I'm coming up through that stitch and then up through the blue stitch. I'm going to take my band, pull down through the 2 sets of stitches, get this back on, and 1 through the other 2. Then we're just going to move over to the next set of stitches. So through the yellow, and then through the next blue, pulling through, back on, and 1 through the other 2, and then 1 more time, and here's where you have to go through that little tight one on the end for the blue. And through. So what that's done is that has just tacked this to the end of the flap. So that way when you're opening your bag, you're not having a loose blue suspender that's going to come all the way apart. I just wanted to do that so it was tacked on there. And then we have to do an additional 5 rows of the suspender, and that's going to connect down here to where we add our button. So you're just going to continue on here. So you'll need 15 additional bands, and we're going to complete 5 more rows. So it's basically the same concept again here. So this time we need to be going in through from the back side. So I'll do my first row here out of those 5. And then you're just going to continue on doing the last 4 rows. So I'll just fast forward through this part. And now once again you have a loose band that you're going to have to tie off here. So I'm just going to go through some bands on the back. We'll do our slip knot. And then I'm just going to hide this loop. Now we have to do the other suspender, so we're going to repeat this same pattern again. So I'm going to be doing it on the left here, so let me just turn this. And again I'm going to the second spot here where the yellow and blue rows meet, and I'm going to go under my first blue, pull through my first band, back on my hook, down through that same hole, scooting over to that next opening, pull through everything, back on, down through the same hole, over to the next. Here's my third, and then again down through the same hole and over to the next for my last one. And now I need to pull one through the other. And now I'm just going to continue back and forth. I'm going to have to go from the back side here. So pushing through, I'm doing my first row. So there's one under the second chain, 2, and then here's my third. And now I have to go in through the front side here. So here's my second row. And now through the back side. Here's my third row. And now you can pause your video again here. You're going to do 27 more rows of blue, 3 in each row, and then I'll meet you back here shortly. Now you should have a total of 30 rows, and so in this 31st row we're going to tack it to the flap. So it's going to be the same way we did the other side. You want to count over 6 stitches from the right. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to come up under that and then also go through the blue stitch. And this is sort of backwards feeling here to me, so let me turn it. I'm coming down through, And then I'm just moving over to the next yellow stitch and the next blue stitch. And then one more time. This is that little tighter one I got to get through. So now that's nice and tacked on there. And then I have to complete 5 additional rows. So you're going to need 15 bands to do those last 5 rows. So I'll just do the first one with you and I'll let you complete the other 4. So at this point here we're reaching in from front to back. And then you would just complete your next 4 rows. Now at the end here you have that loose band that you're going to have to tie off again. So you're just going to go through a couple bands here on the back. Take your additional band, make that slip knot. And then just hide this. The next thing that we're going to make are the eyes. So for that I'm going to do a magic ring of 3. So I have 4 black rubber bands. And I am going to be using a twist tie just to help me get the magic ring started, but that is optional. And then you will need a stitch marker or a clip. So I'm going to take my twist tie and put it right next to my hook. If you don't have this, you would just use your plain hook. And then I'm going to take my first band and triple this. So I'm just twisting and putting it back on till I have 3 loops. And then I'm going to fold my twist tie in half, and that's just going to help hold those 3 loops together. I'm going to pull through my first band, get the other end back on and one through the other, and then back through from the front through those 3 loops, and I'm pulling through my second, one pulls through the other 2, and then back through one more time, and then I'm going to remove this twist tie. And it is a very small magic ring, so you're going to have to stretch this around as best as you can. Try and get it around pretty far, and then you're going to use your clip and put that on the band that's on your hook. In row 2 you'll need 9 white rubber bands, and we're going to be doing 3 single crochet into each one of our 3 stitches. So it is that small magic ring, so your stitch that you need to go to is going to be stretched pretty far over here. So you want to find that over here on the left and go under both loops from front to back. We're going to do a slip stitch since we're changing color, so I'm going through all, and then I'm going back under that same stitch for my second, and then back under one more time for my third. And then I'm moving to my next stitch now. You might want to stretch this out. It's a little bit hard to see where you're going under because it's so small, but just stretch all this out and then you should see your next stitch over here to the left. And again we're doing 3, so that's 1, 2, and 3, and then the last stitch should be where your clip is. Make sure you're going under both loops, and again we have the 3. So there's 1, 2, 2, and 3. And then I'm just going to move my clip. In row 3, you'll need a total of 14 white bands, and we are doing an increase in every other stitch. So you can see the pattern is 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and so on. So here's where we left off, and let me just point out that it may look like this first little white is a stitch we need to go under, but it's actually not because we had done that slip stitch. It's really what I call a false stitch. So just ignore that. It's really this next one that we're going under. And you're doing 2 into this first one, and then 1 in the next, and then an increase, and a single, and so I'm just going to keep repeating that pattern because we want this to still grow, so that's why we're continuing to do an increase. And we started with an increase, and then in the very last stitch we're going to also end on an increase, just because there's an uneven number of stitches. So here's my last single, and then where my clip is, I have 2. Just going to move my stitch marker. And it is going to sort of curl inward, but you can just sort of take your fingers and sort of flatten this out, stretch it out, because we want it to be more flat. In row 4, we're changing to gray, and you'll need 41 bands. So the way that the pattern is, it's going to be 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, so it's an increase in every other. But if you look, the bands are basically doubled because we're doing a stitch of what I'm considering a half double crochet. So basically you need twice as many, except for at the start, and I'll show you that. So here's what we've been working on. You're going to that next stitch over. We're going to take our first band, and it's going to pull through everything. Do that slip stitch, and back on your hook. Then you're just going to leave those 2 loops in your finger, and go back through that same stitch for your second band. So then you'll have the 4 loops, and then the one at the top is going to pull through all. And if you hold this section and pull down on it as you're pulling your hook through, it's going to help it from getting hung up. So you're always going to have 2 loops left, and when you have 4 loops, that's when the upper one will pull through. So I'm moving over to my next stitch. I'll pull through 1 because this one's a single, so I have the 4 loops, and then the upper band is going to pull through all 4. Now in the next one I have an increase, so the first one's going to come under, back on, so you have the 4 loops, and then the upper one's going to pull through all, and since I have 2 in this one, I'm going under that same stitch again, pull through my second band, and then that upper band pulls through all. So now I'm onto a single, so it's just that one, and then the upper band pulls through everything. So it may seem a little bit confusing at first, but I think once you do a couple you'll get the hang of it. So this is my first in this stitch, and then a second. So this is the half double crochet, and you can see that it's giving you that extra height than what a single would. And now this one is just 1. Let me just slide these over. So I did this because I wanted the gray, which is the goggles, to be more outstanding here around the eye. I think it gives it a nice look. And now I have just one. So there's one, and here's my second. I think the hardest part is just trying not to get hung up as you're pulling the band through the other ones. So this is one. Actually, I think I just grabbed the wrong one from the pile. This one was supposed to be over here. And now I have two in this one. And one for this. So we're almost done here. In my second to last stitch here. So that's one. And two. And now in this very last one, I have just a single. So I can now take my clip out, and I do need to close this off. So what I'm going to do is take the one end and pull it through the other to make a slip knot. And then I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to reach down through the back side here, through a couple of these bands, go inside, maybe like 2 or 3, and I'll take an additional gray band. I'm going to pull through everything and make a nice and tight slip knot. And then I'm going to reach inside here again, go inside a lot of these loops, and I'm just going to take my loose band here and just hide that. So just try and make sure that the end isn't sticking out. And here is our eye. So now you'll need to make your second eye, and I'm not going to film this just for the sake of time, but I will add the time to go back to if you want to follow along with the steps again. Once your 2 eyes are complete, then you can attach them onto your minion. So for this, you're going to need probably somewhere around 12 bands. It really depends on how many times you want to come up through and tack them on. So I'm choosing to use white only because where you're going to be coming up through, or at least for the back of the bands, is the white section. So if you use a different color, it's possible that it could be seen through here. But the only problem with doing that is on the inside, it's going to be very visible. Let me show you on the other one so you can see how the white shows through. So if you wanted to, you could try and use black, then you wouldn't see it on the inside, but you might see it coming up through here. So it's really a trade-off, but I think it's a safer bet to use the white. So you want to see where you want these positioned, and obviously they're going to go along this black strap here, and you want to try and leave enough room to make your little mouth. I know it's not a whole lot of room, and what else I like to do is sort of push these up. It's up to you, but I like the gray to be sticking forward, more of like a rim. Plus it leaves more room for the mouth if you do that. So I think that looks pretty good. So obviously we can only do one at a time. So I'm just going to hold this one on, and I'll take this one off. And I'll flip this up here. And I'm going to go in through the black here. So I'll find a spot on the back, stick my hook up through. And then what I want to do is just try and pick up these back bands. the loop's just on the back. So I'm going through 2 here. I'll take my first white band. Whoops. You do kind of have to let it go, so it will shift position a little bit. Go down through, come over, and then pull that to the back. Whoops, I lost it there. Just get that back on. And then 1 through the other. So then I'm going to move around here. Let's see. As I said, this is going to move a little bit. And I'll come up over here. Again, I'm going mostly trying to stay here through the black. And let me just make sure about the position again here. So I'm going to pick up some more of these white bands. Let me move these over here. So again, through the white into the back, and I'm going to go through all, and I'm still pinching this in my fingers. So through all, and I'm going to move just over to the next little opening. Pull this through to the back and 1 through the other. So now I need to come around. So I'm moving back towards myself, and I look still a little bit over to the left. Again, pick up a couple bands on the back here. So I'm going through everything on my hook, and then I'll come back out. Bring this loop through to the back. Let me turn this here, and 1 through the other. So just make sure as you're doing it that your positioning is looking how you want it. So now I'm going to come over here. And you can put as few or as many stitches as you like. I'm going to do about 6 for each. Just continue around here. I feel like I'm not getting the best angle here to see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can see it on the screen. And then I think I'll do one more. And then I just need to tie this off here. So I'll make my nice tight slip knot, and then I'm just going to hide this loop, even though it's already on the inside so you won't see it. Just want it so it's not sticking out. So here's that first eye. And then I'm just going to repeat that same process to add my second eye. So you can pause your video and do that now. Next I'll add the mouth, and for that I'll be using 4 black bands. And you may use more or less, it just depends on how big you want your mouth to be. So you basically want to find the center point and then go over to the left. So I'm going to start to the left and up a little bit. I'm going to come through this one here. So I'll go from the back and push out, grabbing my black band, and I want this to come diagonally down and to the right. So grab that and pull it through to the back, and then one will pull through the other. Then I'm going up through that same hole, pulling the one end to the back and going straight over to that next opening. Get the other end through to the back, and then the one band pulls through the other two. And then back out through that same hole, and I'm just going to pull it through to the back, and I'm going to go up. I want this one to arc up, so diagonally up and to the right, pull it through to the back, and one through the other two. So let me just see what I think about this. I think that's pretty good. So I just need to tie this off. So I'm just going through a couple of these loops on the back. Make that slip knot through everything. And then I just need to hide this. So I think I'll just hide it within the black, just so it's not so obvious. The last thing we need to do is to add our buttons, and you can see that I did put my buttons on a band, on a blue band, and I used a twist tie just to help me thread these. So we just need to see where we want to place the buttons on the minion, and if you look at your flap here, where it naturally closes, it should pretty much line up with the yellow from the main part here. So get those in line with one another. And then in this extra piece that we added onto the suspenders, these 5 rows, you pretty much want it to be in the center of that. So if you take your hook and you go down through, you can kind of see here on the underneath where you want the button to go. So it looks like I want it right here. So what I'm going to do is just take my hook and reach through from the back, push out, going to take one side, pull it through to the back, and then just come up right next to it, grab the other side and pull that through to the back. So now if I flip this inside out, you should see here that I have the 2 loops, and one is going to pull through the other, and then I need to go through some bands on the back side here. So I'll just push through 1 or 2 of those. I'm going to take an additional blue band that's going to pull through everything and make that really nice and tight slip knot. And then I'll just hide this within. Even though you won't see it, you really don't want a big loop sticking out. So I'll just go under some bands. Just make sure that you're staying on the back side here. So there's our first one, and now we'll have to repeat that again for the other side. Now I have to do the button on the other side, and I want it to be symmetrical, so let's just see where our counts are here. It looks like it's in the 1, 2, 3, 4th and 5th space over from the side, and it looks like it's in the 3rd row down. So I'm going to do the same thing on the right here. I'm going to go to the 1, 2, 3, 3rd row down, and then I'm going to move in 1, 2, 3, here's the 4th, so I actually have to come up through that one. I'm going to take the one side, pull pull it through, come right up the next, grab the other side, and go through to the back. Here's where we're going to flip this out. So one will go through the other, and then I'm going to go through some bands on the back and tie this off. And then let me just hide this loop. And then it should be lined up nice and straight. So you want to find where you want your button to go through, and basically you're just going to stretch these bands apart a little bit in the middle, and it should be relatively easy to just push that button up through. And then the same thing on this side. Just find that center point. And push that button right up through. And so our minion bag is complete. And of course, as I showed you at the beginning, if you did want to add a strap, here is my star stitch pattern. And again, I'll add the link to that. Of course, you can do any kind of strap you want. I think this is a nice one because it's a little bit thicker. And you don't have to do the colors like this, but I think it turned out pretty cool. And then if you wanted, you could just attach the strap here and make yourself a little purse. I hope that everyone loves their new minion bags. You can always leave me comments on YouTube and Facebook, post pictures to my Facebook page, and please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on my latest tutorials. You can also find me on Pinterest and Instagram, so please feel free to subscribe to those as well. Thanks for watching!